All right. Isaiah 44, the last chapter for this week. Let's call it All My Purpose, a quote that comes out of the very last verse of the chapter, which in part has as its purpose, once again, the redemption of Israel, as the chapter is going to start out in the first 5 or so verses. Once again, verse 2, having God remind them or call them to fear not, understanding that he is going to pour out his spirit, or he is promising to pour out his spirit on their young people, reminiscent of another prophecy we may see later, one that will actually be quoted by Peter in the sermon on the day at Pentecost, when he is trying to explain the miracles or the miraculous signs that they seem to be seeing on the day of Pentecost as God was pouring his spirit out on the followers of the apostles of Jesus Christ. Understanding that, though, he is going to go on to talk about the way in which, once again, in verses 6 through 8, he is God and there is no other. Not, once again, so he can get vain recognition or vain glory, but so that they can understand that there is no higher power that can revoke his promises or veto the things that he has said. Understanding that, though, in verses 9 through roughly 20, they are free to chase other options, once again in the form of idolatry. However, he's going to go on to talk about the folly of idolatry, verses 9 through roughly 17, talking in detail in a description that I've loved over the years of how the ironsmith and the carpenter will try to fashion an idol, oblivious to the folly in all their efforts, because this chapter, maybe as much as any, in verses 18 through 20, seemed to make clear with idolatry a principle that may hold true for any lie. That is, to the degree that we chase a lie, if we chase it long enough, it's going to diminish our ability to see truth. A principle that we have seen before in Isaiah and other books that seem to be crystal clear to me in these verses in the prophet Isaiah. As verses 21 through 28 of chapter 44 are going to go on to offer them another measure of hope, and no small measure, reminding them once again that he has redeemed them, but for them to make use of that redemption by returning to him, understanding that he has the ability to restore their wasted years, even the wasted abilities that they have lost in their years devoted to idolatry and foolish pursuits. However, he likewise has the ability to frustrate them in their prime to the degree they are chasing ventures that are either shady or just ill-advised. His decision to either restore that which we have lost or frustrate our efforts, quite possibly coming down to a simple question: what are you doing? As we see in the very last verse of the chapter, or as we may see in the very last verse of the chapter, as he talks about his servant Cyrus, a king who is not even of his people Israel. Verse 28 referring to God when it says, "Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose." Thus the title. God's words regarding Cyrus reminding us of his words regarding his Christ or his servant back in chapter 42, which also remind me of something we noticed going all the way back to Noah, when we noticed that Noah was commended for doing all God required of him in building the ark and delivering those who were designated for salvation during the days of the flood, reminding us that God's promises are really only reserved for those who refuse to water down his purpose, his counsel, or essentially anything that he has called us to do. And still leaving room for grace, understanding that none of us follow God perfectly. The fact still remains that to the degree we water down the things that God is calling us to do, it's only a matter of time before we should expect watered down results.